Well, I'm here with the wonderful Jamie Baum. I'm so excited that you're going to be performing in Spokane. Thank you so much for coming for the interview, and thank you for so much for putting together the tour.
Well, we're really excited. My mother and father lived in Washington, and they were in Bremerton, and that's where my brother was born. And I've never been there, so I'm really excited to come. And of course, Spokane never been, so anywhere, Seattle or anything. So we're really excited, and of course, we're excited to be playing. I mean, after almost 18 months of not doing too much, it's going to be very, all that pent up energy is going to really come out.
Yes, and that's got to be such a beautiful thing to just be able to put together a full tour and then just performing your original music with these individuals that you missed so much and meeting new people. So we're so happy to be a part of that. Can you tell us a little bit about your description of the ensemble?
Okay, well, it's an 8-piece group called the Septet Plus, and that was really the suggestion of the record label. I started the group in 1999, believe it or not, as a for my master's in jazz composition recital at Manhattan School of Music. And it's very interesting. I think this will be of interest to, instrumentalists and people that like chamber music as well. Because as a flutist, now when you listen to jazz, there are so many different kind of instruments that have been accepted into what is considered jazz. But for many years, it was very traditional. Trumpet, saxophone, trombone were really the lead instruments. So when I started playing, flute wasn't, it was sort of a double or maybe on a bossa nova or a ballad. So when I was writing, one of my goals was really to elevate the flute to be an important instrument. And so when I put this together with the horns, I thought, well, if I use trombone or baritone, saxophone, or tenor, it's really going to make this flute sound feel very small. So I wanted the same concept, but with a different instrumentation that would also allow me to perhaps do a lot of different kinds of arranging and type of music. So instead of the trombone or bari, I have French horn, which is a little bit lighter but actually has an amazing range. And then I have a guy who plays alto sax, but he also plays bass clarinet and clarinet. So we make use of those colors. And then I have a trumpet player who also plays flugelhorn. And of course, I play flute and alto flute. So we really have a number of colors in addition to guitar. So and the traditional piano, bass, and drums. So it's really exciting to be able to, as anybody who's a composer knows, when you have people to write for who and you can imagine their sounds and what they can do in your head, there's a lot of freedom. And of course, these guys are amazing New York players, and they really can do anything. So, a lot of times I come up with kind of wacky ideas or really challenging ideas, and I throw it at them, and they kind of give me a dirty look, but then they dive in, and it kind of becomes miraculous. What is it? A sum of the parts. So, we've been together a long time. We've done a lot of touring all over Europe and of course on the East Coast, and so we're very excited about hitting the West Coast. We did get to the West Coast for the first time maybe about 3 years ago, where we played at the Monterey Jazz Festival and in Arcata at Redwood Jazz Alliance. But now we're really excited to be able to do a full tour.
Wonderful.
So, yeah.
And you've toured the world. Can you talk a little bit about what that's like and which ensembles you are touring when you've been in the rest of the world?
Well, I always really loved traveling and really loved other cultures, both, the music and the food, and I've just always been very, very curious about that. So one of the things that I just was perfect for me about being a musician was that I love to travel, so to be able to combine that. So that was always a goal for me. Some people don't like travel and they choose other routes, but that was something I really wanted to do. And early on, actually, when I got out of Manhattan School of Music, the State Department had reinstated these State Department U.S. Jazz Ambassador tours, which they had in the 50s and before that. Louis Armstrong, I think, was the one of the first to sort of be sent, you know, all over the world. And so they did that for a while, and then I can't remember when it stopped, but they started it in the mid 90s or the late 90s, joined with the Kennedy Center. And so they started having these kind of auditions where you had to submit, a recording and then go audition in person. And out of that, they chose 10 groups to send on tour to, these underserved places for 6 weeks at a time. So the first one I was able to get was to South America for 6 weeks, and then I did another audition and got another tour to South Asia. So I got to tour, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Thailand, and Nepal, and all over. So and then of course a lot of places in Europe. So it's been really exciting, and in fact, we'll probably play a few pieces. I have some new music that I've been writing during the pandemic. Of course, being sequestered at home is the perfect time to compose. So, you'll hear some world premieres, so to speak, but we'll also hear some music from our last two CDs, which actually were really influenced by my travels to South Asia, and they have some influences from Nepal and India and things like that. So, of course, all filtered in a modern jazz, format, but with a lot of these different influences.
And that's an incredible honor to be a part of the Jazz Ambassadors series. How did that feel to be representing the arts culture from the United States and into the rest of the world?
It was really exciting. I definitely have to say that those are some of the highlights of my career. Because, well, for one thing, as I said, it really joins my passions, and I'm very curious. So it was really wonderful. And of course, you're really treated royally, so to speak, because they take care of you. So you're put in wonderful hotels, and the way that they structure the programs is that you would go somewhere and you would do a few different things in each place you would go. One thing you would do would be to do something at the ambassador residence or the embassy for all the dignitaries. So you'd do a private concert and a dinner, and so you'd meet all these people and be there, and so that was kind of fun. And then, you would do a public concert, and you'd do something at one of the schools or an outreach to students. And oftentimes, what was really wonderful is they would set up collaborative concerts with some of the top musicians there, or local musicians. And so it was a very immersive experience where we got to play with musicians and learn about, the music, and they got to learn about us. And so it was a really wonderful opportunity. I think they were very happy with me, so I was in their system. So frequently when I've been on tour since, if I'm going somewhere, I can, contact the embassy, and they can help sponsor some clinics or concert or things like that. So it's really great.
Wonderful. Now, your latest CD, Bridges, has received a lot of really great reviews and feedback, and it has a lot of different influences. Can you talk a little bit about that project and how that came to be, and about the fellowship, the Guggenheim Fellowship?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, the first 10 years I had the band from when I graduated in 99. A lot of the music, I had a little bit of a different band, some really wonderful musicians, Ralph Alessi, who's from the West Coast, and George Culligan, you may know because he's in Portland. And it was, actually Doug Yates is from the Bay Area too. So it was a great band. And I was very interested in incorporating influences of classical, like Stravinsky and Ives and things like that. So, just expanding jazz format. And then during that whole period was when I did the State Department tours, and I was going to Nepal. I went twice to play at the festival. And I really fell in love with the music very much. In particular, I was turned on to, we'd go to these different places, and as I mentioned, we'd play with different musicians, and they would want us to suggest recordings for them to listen to, and they would give us stuff. So I got turned on to very famous Qawwali Pakistani vocalist Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, who was really credited with bringing that style of music to the West. He actually ended up living in the U.S. for quite some time and did these collaborations with, Peter Gabriel and Michael Jackson, and he was supposed to do something with Madonna, and just a lot of really interesting collaborations, and Ry Cooder and different people. So I really fell in love with this music, and I decided to try to find a way to incorporate that. Plus, the one thing that's so cool, Indian music and South Asian music, they don't have any harmony. Their music developed differently from ours in the West. They became very highly developed through their rhythms and through their development of their scales and their ragas. So, they have quarter tones and microtones, and the way that they develop the melodies by doing all this stuff. And, the rhythms are crazy. They have these tals, which could go on for like 27 beats, and they all come together. So if you ever watch them, they're like counting, and it's extraordinary how evolved that is, but they don't have harmony. So to me, it's like a kid in a candy store. It's like, oh, I can put harmony to this and see what I could do, learning how to develop melody over that in a different way. And so I just started experimenting. And I also, at that time, George moved out of town and Ralph got busy, and it just seemed like the perfect time because I started playing with a wonderful trumpet player, Amir El-Safar, who was kind of steeped in that. And of course, Brad Shepik, who had done a lot of, South Asian music and a lot of different styles. And so they joined the band, and we did In This Life, which really, had a lot of that kind of music. And so I kept, people kept asking me, what's a nice girl like you getting, writing this kind of music, getting so... and falling in love with Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan and this kind of music. So I really started to think about it, and to make a very long story short, I realized, talking to other people, that a lot of the music in South Asia really has similar roots as Middle Eastern and Maqam, Jewish music and Maqam. And there's really a lot of cross connection. So that became a proposal for the Guggenheim, which I got. So I started really sort of delving into that and finding that even, in the 12th and 13th century in South Asia, there were like Sufi rabbis, and they shared a lot of the mysticism and some of the scales and all that kind of stuff. So that was part of the influence of bridges. I co-wrote a piece with Amir El-Safar, which is the first piece on there, called From the Well. And it's using a scale from Maqam and Jewish music, sort of combining it. And so that sort of, you'll hear some of that, a piece inspired by Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan that's, it's kind of really a rock, it became a rock piece, and some things like that. And then the centerpieces that we'll probably also do is I was commissioned by the Rubin Museum of Himalayan Art in Manhattan to write something from their, exhibit. And it was right after the time of the earthquake in 2015. And I had been in Nepal twice, and I'd seen a lot of the places that were destroyed. And I'm very close to a guy who was also on my recording, who runs the festival, is a very fine musician, and I play with him. So he sort of helped me, and I wrote this suite honoring Nepal, the Shiva suite. And Shiva is the god of dance and destruction and renewal. And so we talked about some of the scales associated with that god. And so I wrote this suite that has three different parts to it. And so we'll probably play some of that music along with some of the new music that I've been working on, which is, again, in another direction, but there's definitely a tie-in.
Great. Now, what's influencing some of your new music?
Well, I was like so many musicians, I was in the middle of a month tour in March 2020 when, I had to come home in the middle of the tour and just saw, I had so many tours and, so many things canceled. It was just mind blowing. And so, coming home and then just seeing one by one and really being sequestered, so I'm fortunate, that I love to compose, and of course I can do that at home. But, I live in Midtown Manhattan, 43rd and 9th, very close to Times Square. And of course, we were really, you guys got it, and we got it, in the very beginning. We were kind of like the epicenter, really. And so we live right near 10th Avenue, where there were, right on the way, very close to St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital. So we just kept hearing sirens and sirens and sirens and sirens. So it's kind of a really, very difficult period, sort of not knowing when we'd be able to work again or play or see people or see family, like everybody. So there was a wonderful website. I don't know if you're familiar with Bill Moyers, but I've always been a huge fan of his, and he had a show on NPR for many years. And so he started this website called A Poet a Day. And what he would do is he would feature a really wonderful poet and show their poem and also show a video of them reading that poem. And they were all poems that were kind of related to the pandemic or the social climate. And they were really there to give solace and to contemplate and, during this time. So I started reading the poems and I was really inspired by them. And I thought, well, gosh, it's something I've never done before, and I've always wanted to write music, lyrics with vocalists and poetry. So I sort of started taking those poems and writing music to them, and sometimes spoken word and sometimes with lyrics and influences. So that'll be our next project. I've got some wonderful vocalists enlisted. I don't know if you're familiar with Becca Stevens and Sacho Vesandani, but when we're able to get together and finish the project, and do it. But for now, we're going to be doing probably 3 or 4, half stuff from Bridges and before, and half some of the newer stuff. So you hear a little spoken word and some of the new music that's inspired by, these poems.
Wonderful. And will you be doing the spoken word, or will you pre-record that?
I'm actually having my trumpet player, Jonathan, he sort of volunteered because he was really familiar with Tracy Smith. Like the poems are by Marge Piercy, Adrienne Rich, and Tracy K. Smith, and Naomi Shihab, and so he really loved that. So he was like, well, I'll do it. And I said, that would be great because I'm going to have my hands full, and it'll be kind of our first time really playing some of this music. So, he sort of volunteered. So I'm anxious to see how he does.
Yeah, well, that will be really exciting. Now, can you talk a little bit about your influences as a composer? Who were some of your early influences, and how did you go about gaining those skills?
Well, to be honest, to me, composing and playing and improvising is really the same. You know what I mean? I know it's in the classical world, it's very separate, but in the jazz world, most people who are players also write. And so honestly, I started playing when I was very young. I played piano. And I remember kind of just like noodling, now maybe we'd call it improvising. But, I just always liked making up songs in my head or whatever. But I think, I've always sort of done that. But when it became a little bit more formal was, when I started going to Manhattan School of Music. And, I was a very late bloomer playing flute. And I always sort of felt behind the eight ball, but I always liked to write music as well. And I just kind of, it felt like it came easier to me than even playing. I just kind of sat down and did it. So when I was at New England for my undergrad, I was a double major actually. And then when I went to Manhattan, I was a jazz composition major. So I think my influences, I was very lucky when I was a kid. My mom had actually gone to Juilliard. And so my parents took me to concerts, when I was 4 or 5, I guess probably at whatever point I would not scream or say any, be a disruptor, So I was very lucky, and I always loved a lot of different kind of music. But I think some of my real influences, aside from the obvious jazz influences that everybody has from learning Coltrane and all that, was two things. One, as a flute player, I always played classical music, and when I moved to New York, or even before when I was in Boston, because I didn't really play saxophone, one of the ways that I made a living, like a lot of musicians, was I did a lot of wedding gigs and private functions. And it was always with classical musicians, which I never minded. It just always seemed like I was getting paid to have fun and play. And so a lot of that music was like Bach, and, it was never contemporary. It was always like, the Bach trio sonatas, or, Haydn London trios, or flute, violin, and cello, or Mozart flute quartets, and that kind of stuff. And I loved that music. And one of the things that I loved about the Bach was that, a lot of the counterpoint, and that you would go along, and sometimes, you'd be an inner line, and sometimes you'd be a melody, and sometimes you'd be going along and you didn't know if you were with everybody else until you hit the cadence, And I really loved that, and I wanted to find a way to bring that in to my writing, partly because when I would play with a jazz quartet, I always kind of felt like I was always the melody and the rhythm section were having fun together, and I was on top. So I wanted to sort of be an inner voice, or not always have to be the melody. And also, I just like this idea of a lot of things going on at once, which I always loved. My other big influence was Stravinsky, The Rite of Spring, and I just loved, and Ives, all these things going on at once, and melodies and different functions of the instruments. And so I really wanted to find a way to bring a lot of those things into the jazz format, to sort of open things up and challenge people to sort of solo in a different way. Because on the one hand, I always did jazz gigs playing standards. I was going to say the other thing is, I just love Cole Porter and Gershwin and show tunes. I learned so much from how to write melody and form from that, and I can't stress how important that is to do. So I've always done that, but then I always, and who doesn't love going and taking 30 choruses on a blues? But I'm not so sure that's always so interesting for the audience, you know what I mean? So my goal, I always had like two, like the Gemini, two personas. One was the jazz straight ahead, or just playing tunes, and then the other was my septet, was like my writing muse, where I could, make the flute into something more interesting, or take it in, give the melody to the trumpet or the French horn, and write, with a vamp like from Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, and, do odd things. So that's kind of been, my impetus. And then, of course, there's so many other influences that, like anywhere from Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan to listening to some, Ellington, what he did with his, music, to what a lot of the modern people are doing with their, anywhere from Maria Schneider or Darcy James, Argue, or, so many people are doing such interesting things, that you, or John Hollenbeck, and just get very inspired to try things. So,
Wonderful. Well, we're so excited to have you in Spokane. And for those listening, there will be two performances. One will be at Hoffman Music on Tuesday, the 19th. And I'm going to share the screen here. And then on, oh, is that doing it?
yes.
Okay, great. On the 19th and then on the 20th will be the concert at McNally Recital Hall, and that's at Holy Names Music Center. All the links for getting tickets is going to be at imaginejazz.org, and we are doing e-tickets through Eventbrite, so that we don't have to have all that paper and passing of paper and things like that. So for those interested, and so there will be the workshop at Hoffman Music at 6 p.m. and then the concert the next day. Jamie, run us through a little bit about the tour overall. You're stopping here in the middle.
Yes. Okay, well, before I do that, I had been asked to shout out to friends of Ryan Kibberly,
Oh,
who said,
yes.
"Oh, you're going to Spokane. Well, make sure you get the word out that you're my friend and that you played with me. Tell them everybody to come out." And then, of course, Jason Palmer, who's subbed in my band. He, in fact, played with us when we were at the Monterey Jazz Festival. So he's another Spokane figure. Anyway, so yeah, our tour is really exciting. We actually start next Tuesday in Brooklyn, which is becoming the big epicenter of jazz these days. And then we leave on Wednesday and we'll start on Thursday at the Outpost in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which I played at more than 10 years ago. And then we'll fly the next day to LA and play at the Angel City Jazz Festival at I think it's called Skirball, which is supposed to be a really nice thing. And we're actually doing a double bill with Myra Melford, which will be really cool because I knew Myra when she was in New York, but she's a Bay Area person. And then from there, we're going to the Athenaeum in San Diego. I guess it's La Jolla, actually, but right?
Okay.
So that I'm really looking forward to. I've been out there a couple of times before. They have a nice club called Dizzy's, and of course, it's a home of two very fine flutists, Holly Hoffman and Lori Bell. So that'll be probably a lot of flute players, I think, will come out. And then from there, we fly to Seattle, and we'll play at the Earshot Jazz Festival. And then from there, we're going to drive to Yakima at Seasons and perform there. And then we come to Spokane. And then from there, we fly to play at Kumbwa in Santa Cruz. And then from there, we'll go to Portland at the 1905. And from there to Eureka, Arcata for the Redwood Jazz Alliance. And then home.
Great. Well, that will be really exciting on October 19th and 20th. Is there anything else that you'd like to add or tell our listeners?
Well, just, there's some really wonderful musicians in my band. So if you're not necessarily a flute aficionado, and I do use pedals and some various things. So, I have incredible trumpet player who's from the Bay Area, Jonathan Finlayson. And I have Aaron Irwin who's playing clarinet, bass clarinet, which is really unusual, and alto sax. And then, of course, I have Chris Comer on French horn, which is really unusual. And Brad Shepik, I think maybe he's been out this way. I think he was in maybe Seattle for quite a while, I want to say. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I looked him up, and it looks like he was born in Walla Walla and raised in Seattle, so a fellow Washingtonian.
That's right. And he's an incredible, incredible guitar player. So he just can do anything from like just shredding, rock type stuff to jazz. And he's really great. And then, of course, Jeff Hirschfield's amazing on drums and Ricky Rodriguez on bass and John Escreet, who is just, ridiculous. So I think it's going to be really exciting. And for sure, people should definitely come if you're musicians to the workshop because there's going to be plenty of opportunity to ask questions or, if somebody really feels inspired and they want to get up and play with the rhythm section, we welcome that too. So, whatever, it's a rare opportunity. I mean, in particular, it's just to be able to bring an 8-piece band on the road is just kind of unheard of, and we're very lucky, I should mention, because we did get some grant money from Jazz Road Arts and Chamber Music America to do this. So it's kind of a once, not very often opportunity. So we hope people will, come out and join us and make it special.
Absolutely. And for all those people who've just been dying to hear some live music, this is your chance. But also, if you're not comfortable coming out in person, we do have the live stream option. And also, if you're not local, you can still enjoy this from afar, from the comfort of your own couch or bed with whatever you prefer to eat or drink, and no one will have any judgments. So that's a wonderful option as well. Well, thank you so much, Jamie, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Oh, thanks so much. We can't wait.